In a world gilded by fortune, yet hollowed by longing, a man accustomed to every luxury finds himself haunted by a single truth he never meant to face. One impulsive search for passion beyond his own walls ignites a storm that threatens his name, his empire, and the quiet heart he once pushed aside. Beneath glittering chandeliers and behind closed doors, a forgotten kiss returns with the force of destiny, demanding a choice between pride and redemption, secrecy and desire. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you listening from? And what do you love most about period romances? In the glittering haze of a New York ballroom, under crystal chandeliers that dripped light like molten gold, William Harrington stood at the edge of the crowd. The year was 1887, and the Gilded Age pulsed with the rhythm of fortunes made and lost in a single whisper. He was 35, broad-shouldered and commanding, his tailored black tuxedo hugging a frame honed by years of riding the rails of his vast railroad empire. Dark hair slicked back, eyes sharp as the steel tracks he owned, William sipped champagne from a flute that tasted of nothing but excess. Women swirled around him like autumn leaves in a gale, heiresses with rouged cheeks and silk gowns that rustled like secrets. There was Clara Vanderbilt, her laughter a practiced trill, leaning close enough for him to catch the scent of her jasmine perfume. "Mr. Harrington," she purred, her gloved hand brushing his arm, "they say your trains connect the world, but do they connect hearts?" Her eyes promised nights of forbidden fire, away from the cold marble of his Fifth Avenue mansion. William smiled, that calculated curve of lips he'd perfected in boardrooms and backroom deals. He'd built an empire from nothing, clawing his way from a Pennsylvania coal miner's son to the man who dined with senators. But lately, the victories felt hollow. His marriage to Elizabeth, 3 years now, had soured into polite silences over breakfast, her quiet grace a stark contrast to the wild energy he craved. She was 28, with auburn hair that caught the firelight like embers, and eyes the color of a stormy Atlantic. They'd wed for alliance, her family's shipping fortune bolstering his rails. Love. It had flickered once, in stolen glances during their courtship. Now it was duty, a contract etched in gold. He let Clara pull him onto the dance floor, her body pressing close in the waltz. The orchestra swelled, violins weeping through the air heavy with cigar smoke and ambition. As they spun, William's mind drifted. Elizabeth was home tonight, probably in the library with a book of poetry, her needlepoint forgotten. She never complained about his late nights, his business trips to the opera or the gentlemen's clubs, but in her silence he saw accusation. Was he seeking what she'd withheld? Passion? Escape? Clara's lips grazed his ear. "Join me later. My carriage waits." Her breath was warm, inviting surrender. William hesitated, the music a dizzying blur. He imagined the scandal, whispers in the society pages, the fall from grace. Yet the pull was magnetic, a rebellion against the cage of his life. But then, unbidden, a memory crashed over him like a wave. Their wedding night, in the dim glow of gas lamps. Elizabeth, nervous and radiant in her lace nightgown, her hands trembling as she touched his face. "William," she'd whispered, her voice a fragile thread, "promise me we'll build more than fortunes." And when their lips met, it was fire, raw, consuming, a kiss that spoke of dreams, untainted by dollars. No one had ever kissed him like that since. Not the chorus girls in Chicago, not the widows at Saratoga Springs galas. Nothing compared. The waltz ended. Clara's eyes searched his, expectant. William stepped back, heart pounding. What if he'd lost the one thing real in this gilded farce? What if chasing shadows meant destroying the light at home? He excused himself, weaving through the throng toward the exit. The night air hit him cold on the mansion steps, carriage lamps flickering like distant stars. As he rode home through gaslit streets, the city's pulse mocked him. Horse hooves clopping, vendors hawking dreams for a nickel. Elizabeth. Her name echoed, a hook in his soul. He had to see her, to reclaim what he'd nearly thrown away. The mansion loomed, its windows aglow. William burst through the door, coat unbuttoned, breath ragged. The butler blinked in surprise. "Sir, it's past midnight." "Where is she?" William demanded, voice rough. "In the parlour, sir, reading." He strode down the hall, shadows dancing from wall sconces. There she was, curled in an armchair by the fireplace, a novel open on her lap, her hair loose, falling in waves, her simple wool dress hugging curves softened by the fire's warmth. She looked up, surprise widening those ocean eyes. "William, you're home early." He crossed the room in 3 strides, dropping to one knee before her. "Elizabeth, I was a fool tonight. Out there in that den of vipers I realized something." His hand found hers, calloused fingers against her soft palm. "No one kisses like you. No one ever could." Tears glistened in her eyes, a smile breaking through like dawn. But as she leaned in, the door creaked open behind them, a letter on a silver tray, sealed with black wax. The butler's voice was grave. "From Mr. Thorne, sir. Urgent." William's blood chilled. Thorne, his rival in the rail wars, the man who'd eyed Elizabeth's inheritance like a wolf. What poison did this night bring now? If you're captivated by William and Elizabeth's tangled hearts in this Gilded Age tale, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Tell me your city and country, so I can feel connected to you all. Stick around. Their story of rediscovered love and ruthless intrigue is just beginning. Elizabeth stirred the next morning in the soft light filtering through lace curtains, the scent of fresh coffee wafting from the kitchen below. It was a crisp autumn day in 1887, and the Harrington mansion on Fifth Avenue stood as a testament to their blended fortunes. Her family's old shipping wealth etched in the mahogany paneling, his rail empire gleaming in the brass fixtures. She rose, slipping into a high-necked morning gown of dove-grey wool, its fitted bodice and full skirts whispering against the polished floors. At 28, Elizabeth moved with the quiet poise expected of a society wife, her auburn hair pinned in a simple chignon, a single pearl brooch at her throat, a gift from her late father, Captain Elias Hawthorne, whose ships had once braved Atlantic gales. Downstairs, the household buzzed with routine. The cook, Mrs. Finlay, a stout Irish woman with flour-dusted apron, hummed an old folk tune while kneading dough for scones. "Good morning, ma'am," she said, dipping her head. "The master's already in his study, poor soul. That letter kept him up half the night." Elizabeth nodded, her smile polite but her mind racing back to the evening before. William's sudden return, his knee on the rug, those words, "No one kisses like you," had ignited something dormant. Their lips had met briefly, a spark in the firelit parlour, before the butler's interruption. The letter from Victor Thorne lay unopened on the desk, its black seal unbroken. Thorne, the silver-haired magnate with a fortune in coal and steel, had long circled their union like a hawk. Rumour had it he coveted the rail lines that snaked through Pennsylvania, lines William had fought to claim. She entered the dining room, where silverware clinked on fine china. William sat at the head of the oak table, newspaper spread before him, his face shadowed by lack of sleep. At 35, he cut a striking figure even in casual attire, a crisp white shirt with starched collar, vest unbuttoned over a broad chest marked by faint scars from his rougher days. "Elizabeth," he said, rising slightly, his voice warmer than the chill draught from the window. "Sleep well?" "Like a child," she replied, taking her seat. A maid poured tea, steaming and amber, into her cup. They ate in companionable quiet at first. Poached eggs, toast with marmalade, the clink of forks, a familiar rhythm. But tension simmered beneath. Society's eyes were everywhere. The New York Times chronicled every gala, every whisper of scandal. As wife to the railroad king, Elizabeth navigated a world of rigid hierarchies, morning calls to neighboring matrons, afternoons at charity sewing circles, evenings at operas where fortunes were sealed with a glance. "Tell me about the letter," she ventured, setting down her cup. Her voice held steady, but her fingers twisted the napkin in her lap. William's jaw tightened. He glanced at the empty doorway, ensuring privacy. "Thorne's playing games, invites me to a meeting at his club tomorrow, something about a merger. But the tone, it's laced with threat. He mentions our shared interests, whatever that means." He pushed the paper aside, revealing headlines of stock booms and labor strikes. The Gilded Age churned on, factories belching smoke, immigrants flooding the docks while the elite danced in ballrooms, oblivious to the undercurrents. Elizabeth's heart quickened. Shared interests. Did he mean her? Thorne had paid court to her family before her marriage, his proposals dismissed as too opportunistic. Now, with William's rails expanding westward, rivalries festered. "Be careful," she said softly. "He's not a man to cross lightly." A knock echoed. Jenkins, the butler, with a tray of correspondence. "For you, ma'am, from Mrs. Astor." Elizabeth broke the wax on an embossed envelope. Caroline Astor, Queen of New York society, summoned her to a luncheon at her mansion. "The 400 will be there," William noted, a wry smile tugging his lips. "Best behavior. One wrong word, and we're out in the cold." She laughed lightly, a rare bubble of humor amid the weight. "As if I need reminding. Remember last season's cotillion? I stepped on Duchess Langley's hem, and she swore I'd done it a purpose." His eyes met hers, lingering a beat too long, stirring the embers from last night. "You handle them better than I do. My world is contracts and handshakes. Yours is fans and feigned smiles." The morning unfolded in its ordered dance. Elizabeth retreated to the parlour, where sunlight slanted across Persian rugs. She picked up her embroidery hoop, stitching a pattern of wild roses, symbols of untamed beauty in a clipped garden. But her thoughts wandered to the life she'd left behind. Summers at her family's Newport cottage, sails on the bay, before duty bound her to this gilded cage. William's absences had widened the gulf. His search for thrill outside these walls pained her more than she'd admit. Yet last night's confession hinted at mending. A carriage rumbled outside. Peering through the window, she saw a messenger dismount, hat in hand. He handed Jenkins a small parcel, wrapped in brown paper. "For Mr. Harrington, from the rail offices." William emerged from his study, brow furrowed. He unwrapped it swiftly, a ledger bound in leather, pages filled with figures. "Damnation," he muttered, flipping through. Discrepancies glared. Shipments short, accounts off by thousands. Sabotage, or mere error. Elizabeth joined him, her hand brushing his arm. "What is it?" "Someone's tampering with the books. Could ruin us if it spreads." His voice dropped to a whisper. "Thorne's scent is all over this." The clock chimed 11, marking the hour for her daily walk in Central Park. But as she donned her bonnet and kid gloves, a chill settled. Whispers from the ballroom last night echoed in her mind, hints of Thorne's alliances, his hunger for more than steel. What if his reach extended to their home? To the fragile bridge they'd begun to rebuild. She stepped into the crisp air, leaves crunching underfoot, the city's hum a distant roar. Yet unease clung like fog. A newsboy shouted of rail wars escalating, and Elizabeth wondered if their private world teetered on the edge of that storm. Back inside, as she removed her wraps, a servant murmured of a visitor waiting, unannounced, from Thorne's offices. The door to their sanctuary creaked open once more, inviting shadows in. The afternoon sun slanted through the tall windows of the Harrington mansion, casting long shadows across the marble foyer, like fingers reaching for secrets. Elizabeth paused at the top of the grand staircase, her hand lingering on the polished banister, heart quickening at the butler's words. A visitor from Victor Thorne's offices, unannounced at this hour. She smoothed her skirts, the wool fabric whispering against her legs, and descended with measured steps. William emerged from his study, the ledger still clutched in his fist, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Jenkins, show them in," William said, voice low and edged like a blade. The butler nodded, his livery crisp, and vanished into the drawing room. Elizabeth caught William's eye, a silent question passing between them. He shook his head slightly, stay close, but silent. Moments later, the door swung open. In stepped a wiry man in his 40s, spectacles perched on a hawkish nose, carrying a leather satchel that bulged with documents. He was Mr. Elias Crowe, Thorne's chief clerk, known in financial circles for his unyielding loyalty and sharp tongue. "Mr. Harrington," Crowe began, bowing stiffly, his grey wool suit rumpled from the carriage ride. "Mrs. Harrington, I bring regards from Mr. Thorne. He regrets the urgency but insists on this matter today." Elizabeth took a seat on the velvet settee, folding her hands in her lap to hide their tremble. William gestured to an armchair opposite, but Crowe remained standing as if eager to deliver his poison and flee. "What is this about?" William demanded, setting the ledger aside with deliberate calm. The air thickened, scented with beeswax polish and the faint tang of ink from the satchel. Crowe cleared his throat, pulling out a sheaf of papers bound with red ribbon. "A proposal, sir. Mr. Thorne offers to acquire a controlling interest in your Pennsylvania lines, the ones skirting his coal fields, 20% above market value, cash on the barrelhead. In exchange, he proposes an alliance." His eyes flicked to Elizabeth, lingering a fraction too long before returning to William. "One that benefits all parties." William's laugh was short, bitter. "Alliance. Thorne's been sniffing around my rails for months. This smells like a takeover dressed in silk." He leaned forward, elbows on knees, the firelight catching the tension in his jaw. Elizabeth felt a chill despite the hearth's warmth. "Shared interests," William had said at breakfast. Now it crystallized. Thorne wanted more than steel tracks. He wanted leverage, perhaps even a wedge into their marriage, into her family's lingering shipping ties that could reroute coal shipments profitably. Crowe unfolded a map, yellowed and detailed, showing rail lines snaking through misty valleys. "Consider the terms, sir. Refusal could complicate matters. There are discrepancies in your accounts, as I'm sure you've noticed." He nodded toward the ledger, a sly glint in his spectacles. "Mr. Thorne has auditors who could clarify them for a price." The room spun for Elizabeth. Discrepancies, the parcel from the rail offices, this man knew. Sabotage, then, planted to force William's hand. Her mind raced to the society luncheon with Mrs. Astor that afternoon, the whispers that would fly if word leaked, scandal in the papers, Harrington's empire crumbling, questions of fraud. Their name, once untouchable, dragged through the mud. She rose slightly, voice steady despite the knot in her chest. "Mr. Crowe, this is extortion, plain and veiled. My husband's lines are his life's work, built from sweat and steel, not bought with threats." Crowe turned to her, surprise flickering before his professional mask slipped back. "Mrs. Harrington, with respect, this is business. Mr. Thorne admires your family's legacy. The Hawthorne ships could integrate seamlessly, carrying coal to ports without the delays your rails face." Delays caused by whom? The implication hung heavy. Elizabeth's cheeks burned. Her father had built that fleet through storms and blockades. Now it was bait in a magnate's game. William stood, towering over the clerk, his broad frame blocking the light. "Tell Thorne I'll meet him at the club tomorrow, but on my terms, and take your maps and your alliance with you." His tone brooked no argument, but Crowe merely packed his satchel, unperturbed. "As you wish, but time is a luxury you may not have." He bowed again and departed, the front door clicking shut like a lock turning. Silence fell, broken only by the tick of the mantel clock. Elizabeth crossed to William, placing a hand on his arm, the muscle beneath his sleeve tensed, unyielding. "He's bluffing," she said softly, though doubt gnawed at her. "We can fight this. Hire investigators, shore up the books." William turned, his dark eyes stormy, pulling her close for a moment, the scent of his shaving soap grounding her. "It's not just the rails, Elizabeth. Thorne's after everything. If he spreads those rumours, the board turns, investors flee, and you—" He trailed off, cupping her face, thumb brushing her cheek. "I won't let him touch what's ours." But the hesitation gripped her. Refuse outright. And the social cost mounted. Invitations withdrawn. Alliances shattered. Accept the meeting, and it cracked the door to compromise. The Gilded Age demanded vigilance. One misstep, and they tumbled from the heights. She thought of the luncheon ahead, Mrs. Astor's piercing gaze, the subtle probes into their stability. "Go to the meeting," she urged, voice firming. "But promise me, no deals without me knowing." He nodded, sealing it with a brief kiss, fierce and promising. Yet as he returned to his study, Elizabeth lingered by the window, watching Crow's carriage vanish into the bustle of Fifth Avenue. Horse-drawn omnibuses clattered past, vendors cried their wares, but beneath the city's roar, a rupture widened. Their world of polite distances and hidden passions now faced invasion. That evening, as she dressed for the Astor affair in emerald silk, bustled skirts sweeping the floor, corset laced tight against her ribs, a sealed note arrived by private messenger. From Thorne himself. "The alliance awaits, decline, and shadows lengthen." She crumpled it in her fist, heart pounding. The choice loomed, forcing her from observer to player. Tomorrow's meeting would alter everything, rails, reputation, the fragile bridge between her and William. But as the carriage bore her toward the lioness's den of society, a deeper fear stirred. What if Thorne's hunger reached beyond business into the heart of their rediscovered fire? The carriage jolted over cobblestones, carrying Elizabeth toward Mrs. Astor's opulent mansion on Fifth Avenue, the heart of New York's elite enclave. Emerald silk rustled around her, the gown's high collar framing her neck like a frame of polished jade, its bustle swaying with each rut in the road. At 28, she felt the weight of expectation pressing like the stays of her corset, 20 inches at the waist, a silent enforcer of propriety. The crumpled note from Thorne burned in her reticule, its words a venomous whisper, decline, and shadows lengthen. She straightened her posture, gloved hands clasped, determined not to let fear show in her eyes. The Astor residence loomed like a fortress of brownstone and ironwork, gas lamps already flickering in the late afternoon gloom. Liveried footmen assisted arrivals, their white gloves a stark contrast to the mud-splashed hems of lesser carriages. Elizabeth descended, nodding to familiar faces, Mrs. Vanderbilt in sapphire velvet, her diamonds catching the light like captured stars. Young Miss Langford, barely out of the schoolroom, in pale pink taffeta that whispered of debutante dreams. Whispers rippled as she entered the grand salon, transformed into a tea-room of lace-draped tables and silver samovars steaming with Earl Grey. Caroline Astor held court at the head, her dark hair coiled in an elaborate Gibson style, a brooch of seed pearls at her throat. At 50, she ruled the 400 with an iron fan, deciding who ascended or fell in society's pecking order. "Mrs. Harrington," she said, her voice a silken drawl, extending a hand heavy with rings. "How gracious of you to join us. We were just discussing the rail expansions westward. Such volatile times." Elizabeth curtsied lightly, her smile a practiced veil. "Indeed, Mrs. Astor, progress demands boldness." She took a seat amid the cluster of matrons, the air thick with perfumes, rosewater and civet, and the faint clink of porcelain. Slices of lemon cake and cucumber sandwiches circulated on trays borne by silent maids in starched caps. Conversation flowed like the tea, light at first, veering to the season's operas, the latest Worth gowns from Paris. But Elizabeth sensed the undercurrent, eyes darting her way, measuring. Miss Clara Belmont, a sharp-tongued widow of 25, with raven curls escaping her feathered hat, leaned in from across the table. Her gown of burgundy brocade strained at the bodice, a deliberate allure. "And how fares Mr. Harrington's empire, dear? I hear whispers of irregularities in the ledgers. Nothing serious, I trust?" Her tone dripped honeyed concern, but her eyes gleamed with the thrill of potential scandal. The room hushed slightly, forks pausing mid-air. Elizabeth's pulse quickened, heat rising to her cheeks. Irregularities, Crow's parting shot, already seeding doubt. She met Clara's gaze steadily, fingers tightening around her teacup. "My husband builds on solid ground, Miss Belmont. Rumours are the currency of the envious, wouldn't you agree?" A murmur of agreement rippled, but not from all. Mrs. Langford, the Duchess's aunt, tittered behind her fan. Bold words from a hawthorn. Shipping blood runs thin against steel tracks. One storm, and it all capsizes. The jab landed like a pinprick, subtle yet stinging, class friction laid bare. Elizabeth's family legacy, once a pillar, now dismissed as fragile beside William's iron might. She felt exposed, the room's gaze a collective judgment. No outright rejection, but the chill was palpable. Invitations to future soirees hanging by a thread. Where was William's defense in this? He navigated boardrooms, not tea rooms. His world of handshakes left her to parry alone. Yet amid the tension, a small anchor appeared. As maids cleared plates, one placed a silver tray before Elizabeth, a calling card embossed with William's initials, slipped in discreetly by a messenger earlier. On the back, in his bold script, "Hold the line, dinner at Delmonico's tonight. Yours, W." No grand gesture, just a micro-touch across the distance, a shared silence in ink. Her heart steadied, a flicker of warmth cutting the frost. He knew, somehow he'd anticipated the probe. The luncheon dragged on, topics shifting to charity bazaars and European tours. Elizabeth contributed sparingly, her poise unbroken, but Clara's barbs lingered like smoke. As guests rose to depart, Mrs. Astor pulled her aside in the foyer, under the watchful eyes of a marble bust of Caesar. "You're a resilient one, Elizabeth, but mind the winds, they shift quickly in our circles. A warning or pity." Elizabeth murmured thanks, stepping into the cooling air. Back home, the mansion's clock struck 5, shadows lengthening across the Persian rugs. William awaited in the library, pacing before shelves of leather-bound volumes, Thackeray, Dickens, tomes on rail engineering. He turned as she entered, his vest unbuttoned, sleeves rolled to reveal forearms corded from years of manual labor before fortune smiled. "How did it go?" he asked, crossing to her, his hand brushing her elbow, a light rose, electric in its restraint. "Testing waters," she replied, removing her bonnet, auburn waves tumbling free. "Clara Belmont fishes for scandal. Your ledgers are fodder now." She showed him the card, his eyes softening in that shared glance, a bridge over the widening chasm. He nodded, pulling her into a brief embrace, the scent of his cigar and sandalwood enveloping her. "Thorns shadows, but we'll outmaneuver them." The moment stretched, intimate, their breaths sinking in the quiet room. A small advance, trust deepening without words. Yet as twilight fell, a newsboy's cry pierced the dusk from the street. "Extra! Rail magnate's books under scrutiny. Harrington lines in peril." Elizabeth froze, peering through the curtains. The evening edition hawked on every corner, visible consequence, ink black and spreading. Thorne watched from the wings. His first strike landed. What fresh humiliation awaited at Delmonico's, where the elite dined and dissected. The gas lamps of Delmonico's flickered like wary eyes as William and Elizabeth stepped from their carriage, the evening air thick with the scent of roasting chestnuts and coal smoke from passing hansoms. The restaurant, a beacon of Gilded Age excess on Beaver Street, hummed with the low murmur of power brokers, senators in pinstripe suits, brokers with fat cigars, their laughter booming over clinking crystal. William offered his arm, his tailcoat impeccably cut, the faint stubble on his jaw adding a rugged edge to his polished demeanor. Elizabeth's emerald gown caught the light, its silk shimmering like a secret, but her steps faltered at the doorman's announcement. "Reservation for Harrington? Ah, yes. But there's a private matter awaiting you inside." "Sir." They entered the opulent dining room, where crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls, casting a golden glow over white linens and silver-domed platters. The maitre d' led them past tables laden with oysters on ice and foie gras, but instead of their corner booth, he steered toward a shadowed alcove. There, at a table set for two, sat a figure Elizabeth hadn't expected. Her younger brother, Nathan Hawthorne, 24, and freshly returned from a voyage on one of the family ships. His face was weathered by salt spray, blonde hair tousled under a low-crowned hat, his wool greatcoat still dusted with the harbour's grime. "Nathan!" Elizabeth gasped, rushing forward. He rose, enveloping her in a bear hug that smelled of tar and ocean brine. William hung back a pace, surprise etching his brow, but he extended a hand. "Hawthorne, didn't know you were in town." "Couldn't miss this storm," Nathan replied, his voice rough from weeks at sea. "Father's old contacts wired me, thorns circling like a shark. Thought you two could use an ally who knows the water routes." He glanced at the empty chair, then at the maitre d', who nodded discreetly. "But first, eat. The lobster's worth the trip." They settled, the alcove's heavy drapes muffling the room's din, creating an unintended cocoon of intimacy. Waiters glided in with champagne, chilled in silver buckets, and platters of seared foie gras drizzled with Madeira. Conversation flowed haltingly at first, Nathan regaling them with tales of dodging icebergs off Newfoundland, his laughter a rare buoy in the tension. But as the main course arrived, thick cuts of beef Wellington, steam rising like whispered confessions, the mood shifted. A sudden downpour hammered the windows, thunder rumbling like distant artillery, trapping them in the alcove as lightning cracked the sky. Elizabeth sipped her wine, the ruby liquid warming her veins. "You look tired, Nathan. The ships. They're holding?" He set down his fork, eyes darkening. "Holding, but barely. Thorne's bought off half the dockmasters in Philadelphia. Delays on coal shipments. Your rails suffer. Our hulls sit idle." He leaned in, voice dropping. "It's not just business, Liz. He asked about you once in Boston. Said you were wasted on a railman, that Hawthorne blood deserved better." William's fist tightened around his glass, knuckles whitening. The storm outside intensified, rain lashing the panes, sealing their world to this table. Elizabeth felt the walls close in, not unpleasantly, the forced proximity stripping away the mansion's formal barriers. She reached for William's hand under the tablecloth, her fingers intertwining with his, a silent anchor amid the gale. As dessert, crème brûlée with crackling caramel arrived. Nathan pulled a small object from his coat pocket, a tarnished silver locket, its chain fine as spider silk. "Mother's," he said softly, passing it to Elizabeth. "Found it in Father's sea chest before I sailed. She wore it the night she met him, said it held her heart's compass." The locket opened to a faded miniature portrait. Their mother, young and laughing, auburn hair like Elizabeth's, eyes bright with unscarred hope. Elizabeth's throat tightened, memories flooding. Her mother's death 5 years prior, in a carriage accident during a blizzard. Guilt she'd buried deep for urging the trip despite the weather. I forgot how she smiled," she whispered, tracing the tiny face. Tears welled, unbidden. William watched, his usual reserve cracking. He covered her hand with his, thumb stroking gently, the gesture intimate, revealing layers he'd hidden behind empire building. The storm peaked, wind howling, forcing the restaurant's doors shut, stranding patrons in clusters of forced camaraderie. In their alcove, vulnerability bloomed. William cleared his throat, voice low. I know loss too. My father. The mine collapse in Pennsylvania. I was 18, pulling his body from the rubble, swore I'd never let weakness touch me again. His eyes met hers, raw for the first time. Not the magnate, but the boy who'd clawed from ashes. That's why I pushed you away, Elizabeth. Duty over dreams. Feared if I let go, it'd all crumble. She squeezed his hand, the locket warm between them. And I hid in silence, mourning what we lost before it began. But last night, your words, they woke something. No grand promises, just the weight of shared wounds, trust weaving tighter without flame. Nathan watched quietly, then rose. I'll scout the bar, give you space. He slipped away, leaving them in the candlelit hush. William leaned closer, forehead nearly touching hers, breaths mingling. We'll face Thorn together, no more shadows. The air hummed with possibility, emotional tides rising, a tacit vow in his steady gaze, changing the chill to warmth. But as the rain eased, a waiter approached, tray in hand. Urgent wire for Mr. Harrington. William unfolded the damp paper, face paling. Board meeting called at dawn. Thorn's allies pushing for audit. Full exposure. The fragile peace shattered, shadows lengthening once more. Elizabeth's heart sank, their stolen intimacy, tested already by the encroaching storm. Dawn broke grey and unforgiving over the Harrington mansion, the first light of 1887's chill November seeping through heavy velvet drapes like an unwelcome intruder. William hadn't slept. The wire from Delmonico's burned in his mind, Thorn's allies on the board, demanding an audit at the crack of day. He dressed swiftly in the dim gaslight of his chamber. Starched white shirt, black wool trousers, a grey vest that hugged his broad frame. At 35, fatigue etched lines around his eyes, but resolve hardened his jaw. Elizabeth stirred in the adjoining room, her auburn hair splayed across the pillow like spilled wine. He'd left her there after the storm's revelations, their hands lingering too long, words unspoken, hanging heavy. William? Her voice, soft and sleep-mussed, called from the doorway. She appeared in a simple cotton wrapper, belted at the waist, her bare feet silent on the rug. The locket from Nathan dangled at her throat, a new talisman. He turned, forcing a smile. Go back to bed. This is boardroom dirt, nothing for you to soil your hands with. But she crossed to him, placing a palm on his chest, feeling the rapid thump beneath. Nathan's tales last night. Thorn's grip tightens. Let me come. As your wife, I have stake in this. Her eyes, stormy blue, held his, the intimacy from the alcove still flickering. He hesitated, then nodded. The club's no place for skirts, but stay in the carriage if it turns ugly. They descended to the foyer where Jenkins waited with coats, his greatcoat of thick wool, hers a fur-lined mantle against the biting wind. The carriage clattered off before 6, wheels crunching frost-laced gravel, the city awakening in muffled gasps, milk wagons rumbling, lamplighters dousing the last flames. The Union League Club loomed on East 39th Street, its stone facade a bastion for the city's titans. William alighted first, offering Elizabeth his arm through the shadowed alley where she'd wait. If I don't emerge by 8, send Nathan. His kiss on her forehead was brief, fierce, a promise amid peril. Inside, the air reeked of polished oak and pipe tobacco, crystal inkstands glinting on mahogany tables. The boardroom, panelled in dark walnut, held 12 men in wingback chairs, their faces stern under gas mantles. Victor Thorne dominated the head, silver hair gleaming, his paunch straining a brocade vest embroidered with coal motifs. At 52 he exuded predatory calm, fingers steepled over a stack of ledgers. "Harrington," Thorne drawled, voice like gravel under boots, "punctual as your trains. Sit, we've matters to air." William took his seat, scanning allies. Old Mr. Pendleton, wheezing from gout, nodded weakly. Young banker Ellis fidgeted, sweat beading his brow. Thorne's faction, 3 coal barons and a judge, leaned forward, eyes hungry. "The audit," William stated flatly, cutting the preamble. "What's the play?" Thorne slid a dossier across the table, its leather cover stamped with the club seal. Pages rustled open, falsified invoices, phantom shipments, discrepancies totaling tens of thousands. "Your books, Harrington, cooked like a miner's stew. Investors pull out, lines seize up. Unless—" He paused, letting the word dangle like a noose. "You cede the Pennsylvania Spurs. My Spurs." William's blood boiled. "Sabotage, blatant now. Crow's visit yesterday a feint. Fabrications. My auditors will prove it." But Pendleton coughed, voice frail. "Proof takes time, lad. Stocks dip already. The Times runs it by noon." The room erupted in murmurs. Ellis bolted up. "Thorne's offer saves us all. Merge, or we sink." Betrayal stung. Ellis, once a boyhood chum from the rails. Thorne's smile widened, revealing gold-capped teeth. "And your wife, Harrington. Hawthorne ships could haul my coal clean. A family affair, eh? Pity if scandals touch her salons." The threat coiled, personal now. William slammed the table, chair scraping back. "You touch Elizabeth, and I'll bury you in your own pits." Fists clenched, he stormed out, the door banging like thunder. Allies lost, reputation fracturing public. Headlines would scream fraud by breakfast. Outside, Elizabeth waited in the carriage, bundled against the cold, breath fogging the window. She saw his face first, pale fury, and her heart plummeted. What happened? Betrayal. He climbed in, voice raw. Thorns poisoned the board. Audit forced, lines in jeopardy, and he dragged you into it. The carriage lurched forward, but William pounded the roof. "Stop! I walk from here." "William, no." She grabbed his sleeve as he descended into the street. Pedestrians hurried past, collars up against the wind, oblivious to the unraveling. "We face this together. Last night—" He pulled away, eyes tormented. "Last night was weakness. I can't drag you down with me. Go home, Elizabeth. Protect the name." His broad shoulders slumped. The Magnate cracked, isolation wrapping him like chains. No return to the man who'd knelt by the fire. This fracture ran too deep. She watched him stride into the fog-shrouded dawn, vanishing toward the rail yards, his empire's heart now a battlefield. Tears stung her eyes. The carriage rolling on alone, Thorne's frontal assault had landed, wounding public and private. Allies fled, trust shattered. Their bridge, newly mended, teetered on collapse. But as the mansion gates loomed, a boy on a bicycle wheeled up, thrusting a sealed envelope. "For Mrs. Harrington, urgent, from Mr. Thorne." Her hands shook opening it. A single line. "The Alliance calls. Or watch your world burn." The ultimatum sealed it, no turning back. Elizabeth crumpled the envelope in her fist, the paper crackling like dry leaves underfoot. The carriage rocked on, bearing her back to the mansion alone, the ultimatum from Thorne searing her mind. "Watch your world burn." She pressed the locket to her chest, its cool metal a reminder of lost anchors. Dawn's grey light yielded to morning bustle. Vendors hawking newspapers, the clatter of hooves on Fifth Avenue. But isolation clawed at her. William's retreat into the fog haunted her steps as she entered the foyer, Jenkins taking her mantle with a sympathetic nod. "Has Mr. Harrington returned?" she asked, voice steady despite the tremor. "Not yet, ma'am, but a package arrived for you." From the Hawthorne estate. The butler gestured to a side table where a wooden crate sat, splintered from hasty packing. Elizabeth's breath caught. Nathan must have sent it from the docks, a lifeline amid the storm. She pried it open in the library, splintered wood scattering across the rug. Inside lay a bundle of yellowed letters, tied with faded ribbon, and a leather-bound diary, its spine cracked from years untouched. Her mother's hand, elegant script looping across pages. Heart pounding, Elizabeth sank into William's armchair, the scent of his pipe tobacco lingering. The first letter slipped free, dated 1872, from Elias Hawthorne to her mother Eliza. My dearest, the ships sail true, but without you, the seas are empty. Marry me, and we'll chart our own course. Tears blurred the ink as she delved deeper. The diary revealed fractures, Eliza's confessions of doubt before the marriage, her father's gambling debts hidden behind the Hawthorne facade. Elias borrows from shadows to keep the fleet afloat. Victor Thorne lent first, said it was investment, but his eyes, they demand more than repayment. Thorne. Even then, his web had touched her family. Pages turned to warnings, Eliza's fear of scandal, the pressure to ally with stronger fortunes. I chose love over safety. Elizabeth, if you read this, guard your heart. Debts bind tighter than vows. Elizabeth's hands shook. This was the structural truth, a complot woven decades back. Thorne's alliance wasn't new greed. It was old vengeance. Her father's unpaid markers twisted into leverage against William's rails. The Hawthorne ships, her dowry's core, weren't freehold. They were collateral, manipulated in ledgers to force this merger. Proof stared back. A ledger insert. Forged signatures mirroring the discrepancies in William's books. Thorne hadn't just sabotaged, he'd unearthed buried debts to claim it all. Footsteps echoed in the hall. William burst in, coat dusted with rail yard soot, his face gaunt from the dawn's battles. Elizabeth. I walked the yards, the foreman whisper of bribes, Thorne's men planting doubt. He stopped, seeing the open crate, her tear-streaked cheeks. What is this? She rose, pressing the diary into his hands. Truth, our family's sins, tangled by him. My father borrowed from Thorne years ago. He twisted it into chains, for the ships, for us. William flipped pages, eyes widening at the ledger, the letters. Silence stretched, broken only by the tick of the mantel clock. Then fury ignited in his gaze, not at her but at the puppet master. Damn him, William growled, slamming the book shut. I thought it rail wars, but this, it's personal. He preyed on your father, now us. He stepped closer, not in anger, but revelation, his coldness reframed, not indifference, but guilt from his own losses, fearing he'd drag her into his climb. His hand cupped her elbow, a contained touch, trust bridging the gap. I pushed you away to protect this, but no more. We're equals in this fight. Hope flickered, a peak amid the valley, their shared wound mending into alliance. Elizabeth nodded, wiping her eyes. Then we expose it, not in shadows, but light. I'll write to Mrs. Astor, the society matrons. A salon for women's causes. Shipping widows, rail families hit by strikes. Invite the press. Show Thorne's greed harms more than us. William's eyes softened, admiration cutting the storm. Agency like that, it's fire. He pulled her into a brief embrace, foreheads touching, breaths sinking. No passion's rush, but deepening trust, a vow in the quiet library. She acted swiftly. By noon, her letter circulated, an invitation to a charity assembly at the mansion next week, framed as aid for working families, but laced with subtle jabs at monopolies crushing the small. Let us unite against those who hoard while others starve, it read. Responses flooded. Mrs. Astor intrigued, even Clara Belmont's barbed acceptance. Social perception shifted. Whispers turned from scandal to her boldness, the humiliated wife rising as advocate. But danger crested. As evening fell, a messenger hammered the door. Thorne's card, black-edged. Interfere, and the debts surface. Your salons become salons of shame. Indignation boiled. Thorne, the silver-tongued viper, preying on legacies, twisting love into leverage. The public would see his rot. William returned from the yards, finding her at the desk, quill poised. The board wavers. Some heard of your letter. But Thorne rallies his dogs. He knelt beside her, hand over hers. This changes us. No more duty's cage. Yet the valley deepened. A evening edition slapped the hall table. Harrington audit looms. Debts from Hawthorne past. Thorne's strike. Public now. Allies scattering. Elizabeth's heart raced, but resolve hardened. Their advance evoked his wrath, greater threats looming. The next morning brought summons, an invitation to the Metropolitan Opera Gala, Thorne's domain, where elite converged. Appear, it commanded, or the curtain falls on your name. The decisive stage awaited, their truth ready to unfold. The Metropolitan Opera House gleamed like a jewel in the November twilight of 1887, its marble facade aglow under gaslights that hissed against the chill. Carriages lined the streets, wheels churning mud into the air, as New York's elite descended in a swirl of velvet capes and fur stoles. Elizabeth Harrington stepped from the brougham, her gown of midnight blue satin whispering against the steps, its fitted bodice embroidered with silver threads that caught the light like distant rails. At 28 she stood tall, auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon adorned with pearls. The locket hidden beneath her collar, a secret compass against the storm. William flanked her, his tuxedo sharp as a contract, broad shoulders squared, but his hand at her elbow betrayed a subtle tremor. The gala promised Verdi's Aida, but for them it was theatre of a deadlier sort. Thorne's summons, a trap wrapped in invitation. They entered the grand foyer, where crystal chandeliers dripped light onto mosaic floors, the air thick with orchids and whispered alliances. Matrons in jewel-toned silks clustered like birds of paradise, fans fluttering secrets. Mrs. Astor nodded from her box, her gaze appraising. Clara Belmont smirked nearby, burgundy gown straining as she leaned toward a cluster of whispers. Harrington's debts. Hawthorne ghosts rising. Someone murmured, the words slicing through the hum. Elizabeth's cheeks warmed, but she lifted her chin, William's presence a steady wall. We face him head on, he'd said that morning, after her letter had rippled through society, turning pity to curiosity. Her charity salon loomed next week, but tonight decided if it lived. The orchestra tuned, violins keening like warnings. As they claimed seats in the orchestra level, prime view Thorne's doing. He appeared moments later, silver hair slicked, his paunch hidden under a brocade waistcoat, flanked by two allies, the judge from the board meeting and a sallow accountant clutching a dossier. Thorne's eyes locked on Elizabeth, a predator's gleam. Mrs. Harrington, he purred, bowing low enough to mock, you grace us. And Mr. Harrington, bold to show your face amid the scrutiny. William's jaw clenched, but he nodded coolly. Business waits for no curtain, Thorne, nor does truth. The lights dimmed, the overture swelling, but tension coiled tighter than the strings. During the first act, as Aida's captives marched in chains on stage, a page slipped through the aisle, delivering a sealed note to William. He broke the wax, Thorne's seal, and scanned the lines, his face drained of colour. Bastard, he muttered, passing it to Elizabeth. Forged ledgers, dated to her father's hand, claiming the Hawthorne ships as collateral for Thorne's old loans. Accompanying testimony from a witness, a bought dockhand, swearing Elias Hawthorne fled debts, leaving his daughter to pay. It was sabotage's crown. A fake letter implicating her family in fraud, to be unveiled at intermission by Thorne's judge ally, right there in the program notes distributed to the 400. Elizabeth's heart hammered, the opera's tragedy mirroring their own. Radames pledged love amid peril. She gripped William's hand, nails digging in. He'll expose it publicly. Our names ruined before the salon's ink dries. But revelation from the diary fueled her. This was Thorne's endgame. Humiliate them, claim the rails and ships in the fallout. Intermission bells chimed, patrons rising in a rustle of silk. Thorne stood at the foyer podium, the judge beside him, dossier raised like a gavel. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thorne announced, voice booming over the chatter, "before we resume a matter of public trust, the Harrington Empire teeters on Hawthorne debts, fraud unearthed, alliances shattered." Gasps rippled. Clara Belmont crowed softly. Mrs. Astor frowned, fan stilling. Eyes turned to Elizabeth, judgment sharpening. Thorne unfurled the fake letter, reading aloud in theatrical tones. "Elias Hawthorne confesses evasion, pledging his fleet and his daughter's future to settle scores." The crowd murmured, stocks invisible but crashing in minds. William surged forward, but Elizabeth halted him with a touch. "Not rage, proof." She nodded to the shadows. Nathan, her brother, emerging from the crowd in his naval coat, a wrapped parcel under arm. Her letter had summoned him, and old family retainers, a grizzled captain from the Hawthorne line, clutching authentic logs. "Mr. Thorne," Elizabeth called, voice clear and unyielding, stepping to the podium's edge. Gasps turned to her. "You weave old lies into new chains, but truth sails freer." She gestured to Nathan, who unveiled the crate's contents on a nearby table. The diary, letters, the real ledger insert exposing Thorne's forgeries. The captain testified next, voice gravelly from sea winds. "I sailed with Captain Hawthorne. No debts fled. Thorne's loans were usury, hidden to seize the fleet when Elias died." Murmurs swelled to outrage as Nathan displayed side-by-side documents, ink analysis by a trusted calligrapher proving the fakes. "Your witness?" Elizabeth pressed, eyes on the dockhand cowering in the back. "Bought silence, but gold buys truth too. He recants, your bribes recorded." The foyer erupted, Thorne's face purple, dossier crumpling in his fist. "Lies, slander from a shipping widow." But Mrs. Astor rose from her seat, voice cutting like ice. "Enough. This reeks of monopolies rot, Mr. Thorne. The 400 values honor, not extortion." Applause thundered. Clara Belmont silenced, the judge slinking away. William joined Elizabeth, his arm around her waist, their united front reframing her. No longer the shadowed wife, but the lioness who'd bared the viper's fangs. Thorne staggered back, allies deserting, his empire's facade cracking under the lights. Public humiliation complete. He'd slink to exile, rails and ships safe, debts dissolved by the truth's flood. The opera resumed, but the crowd buzzed with their victory. In the quiet of their box later, as Eyre triumphed on stage, William turned to Elizabeth, his hand finding hers in the dim. Silence wrapped them, post-storm calm, breaths sinking in tacit promise. No words needed, just the deepening bond, eyes locking on a future unchained. Yet as the final curtain fell, a whisper reached them, Thorne's final card, a shadow lingering in the wings. If you're thrilled by William and Elizabeth's hard-won triumph, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any more gripping tales from the channel. The final notes of Eyre faded into thunderous applause. But in the Harrington's box, the air hummed with a different crescendo, the quiet aftershock of triumph. Elizabeth's hand rested in William's, their fingers laced like rails merging tracks. As the crowd below dispersed in a flurry of silk and murmurs, Thorne's shadow had recoiled, his forged documents scattered like fallen leaves, his allies melting into the throng. The judge who'd flanked him slunk out a side door, head down. Even the sallow accountant vanished into the night, dossier abandoned. Whispers chased them. Thorns done, debts exposed, his coal empire cracking. But that final whisper Elizabeth caught, a servant's hurried aside to a footman, lingered like smoke. Thorn's last card. What poison did he hold yet? They descended the grand staircase, arm in arm, the foyer now a battlefield of averted eyes and forced smiles. Clara Belmont hovered at the edges, her smirk twisted into something like envy, but she offered a stiff nod. "Well played, Mrs. Harrington. Society needs its heroines." Mrs. Astor approached, her fan tapping William's arm lightly. "You've earned your place anew. My salon doors remain open. Perhaps lead the next charity drive." Elizabeth inclined her head, voice steady with newfound authority. "With pleasure. For the widows and workers, Thorn's greed has crushed." The matron's approval sealed it. The 400's verdict shifted, repositioning neutrals like Clara from foes to wary spectators. Outside, the November chill bit sharp, but Nathan waited by the brougham, his naval coat buttoned tight, a grin splitting his weathered face. "Heard the roar from the street. You two dismantled him like a rotten mast." He clapped William's shoulder, the gesture bridging old tensions. Railman and ship captain, now kin in battle. "The dockhands are yours. They'll testify against Thorn's bribes come morning." Father's logs cleared the air. Elizabeth hugged him fiercely, the locket at her throat warm against his wool. "Stay in town. The Hawthorne fleet sails with us now. Clean routes, no shadows." Nathan nodded, eyes bright. "Aye, and I'll captain the first joint run. Coal to rails, rails to seas." Rewarded, he mounted his horse, vanishing into the gaslit streets, his path charted brighter. The carriage bore them homeward, wheels rumbling over uneven stones, the city's pulse slowing to a hush. William broke the silence first, his voice low, rough with unshed emotion. "You were magnificent tonight, not the wife in the background, the force at the helm." He turned her face to his, thumb tracing her jaw, the touch intimate, equal. No grand declarations, just the raw truth of transformation. Her voice, once silenced in parlors, now commanded auditoriums. His leadership, once solitary steel, softened with compassion for the families his rails displaced. Elizabeth met his gaze, the stormy blue of her eyes reflecting the passing lamps. "We both changed. I hid in duty's veil. You chased escapes to outrun loss, but together." She paused, the words hanging like a vow. At the mansion gates they alighted, the butler Jenkins lighting their way with a lantern. Inside, the library awaited, shelves of forgotten tomes, the fire rekindled to ward off the cold. No toxic relics here. William fetched a simple gold band from his study drawer, unadorned, forged fresh from a Fifth Avenue jeweler that week. No heirlooms burdened by debts or duty. "This," he said, sliding it onto her finger beside her wedding ring, "for the woman I choose now, equals building legacy, not just fortunes." She covered his hand with hers, the metal cool against her skin. "And this space, renew it with us." They envisioned it aloud, walls lined not with ledgers, but books for scholars, a wing for a school, teaching rail orphans trades, shipping daughters navigation. Her charity salon would fund it, Thorn's fall the catalyst. By dawn, lawyers would descend, Thorn's loans dissolved as usury, his rights stripped in court, exile to his lesser holdings in Pittsburgh. The papers would trumpet it. Magnate sanctioned, Harrington's rise unscathed. Their union, the era's new emblem. Morning light filtered through the curtains as they stood by the window, overlooking Central Park's bare branches. William drew her close, his lips finding hers. Not the frantic spark of rediscovery, but a deep, affirming kiss born of love freely chosen, horizons unfolding. Below, workers laid fresh tracks, a legacy in motion, rails linking to ships, fortune shared with the striving. Compassion marked them now, William pledging funds for labourers' halls, Elizabeth her voice for women's guilds. The Gilded Age's glitter dimmed for them, replaced by a steadier glow. Yet as they parted, a knock echoed. Jenkins with a silver tray. A letter postmarked from Thorne's Club, its wax unbroken. William broke the seal, scanning the elegant script. He concedes, retires west, but mentions a distant cousin eyeing old roots. A soft hook, the intrigue not ended but evolved. Elizabeth smiled, leaning into him. Let them come. We're ready. The future beckoned, their world renewed, unbreakable. 10 years had woven their quiet magic over the Harrington legacy, transforming the raw edges of 1887's triumphs into a tapestry of enduring light. It was 1897 now, and the mansion on Fifth Avenue stood not as a fortress of excess, but a beacon of shared purpose. Its once stern facade softened by ivy climbing the stone, windows thrown wide to the spring breeze, carrying scents of blooming lilacs from Central Park. Elizabeth Harrington, at 38, moved through the sun-dappled parlour with the grace of a woman who'd tamed tempests. Her auburn hair, threaded with silver like autumn leaves in a flame, was pinned loosely, a few strands escaping to frame eyes that held the depth of oceans navigated. Motherhood had rounded her figure gently, her simple day dress of soft blue cotton, high-necked, free of the era's rigid corsets, swishing as she knelt by the hearth, arranging wildflowers in a vase. No longer confined to society's rigid dances, she breathed freer, her voice a force in women's circles that echoed far beyond New York. William emerged from the study door, his steps lighter than in the rail war's fury. At 45, the broad-shouldered magnate had traded some of his sharp edges for wisdom's warmth, hair greying at the temples, faint lines etching his face like tracks on a well-travelled map. His shirt sleeves rolled up revealed forearms, still strong from occasional rides along the lines. But now he carried a ledger, not of profits, but of endowments. Funds for rail workers' cooperatives, shipping scholarships for daughters of captains like her father. Elizabeth, he called, voice rich with the intimacy of years. The board approves the new wing. Your school for the orphans opens next month. He crossed to her, pulling her up into an embrace, his hands calloused yet tender cupping her face. Their kiss lingered, unhurried, a reaffirmation of the fire rediscovered that night by the firelight, now banked into an eternal glow. No one kissed like her, he'd whispered then. Time had only deepened the truth. The parlour door burst open, laughter spilling in like sunlight. Their children tumbled after, young Elias, 8 and wiry with his father's dark hair, clutching a wooden train set carved from Pennsylvania oak. "Papa, look, it goes all the way to the sea, like Uncle Nathan's ships." Beside him skipped little Eliza, 5, her curls a wild echo of Elizabeth's youth, clutching a doll dressed in miniature sailor blues. And Mama's boats carry the coal fast, no more waiting. The children had come 3 years after the opera's victory. First Elias in the quiet of a summer dawn, then Eliza amid a blizzard that tested but never broke their bond. Fatherhood had reshaped William, turning the empire builder inward. He'd missed fewer dinners, shared more stories of his coal miner roots, teaching the boy to respect the hands that laid the tracks. Elizabeth scooped Eliza into her arms, the girl's giggles bubbling as she nuzzled her mother's neck. "Did you help Papa with the plans today?" she asked, eyes sparkling with the curiosity Elizabeth fostered in her reading circles. The girl nodded vigorously. "I drew a picture for the school, kids learning to read maps." William ruffled Elias's hair, pride swelling in his chest. "That's my engineer. One day you'll run lines that connect hearts, not just coasts." The family gathered on the settee, the children's energy a joyful chaos. Elias demonstrating his train's whistle, Eliza reciting a poem from her mother's lessons. Love had resisted time's pull, blooming not in grand gestures, but in these stolen mornings, where duty yielded to delight. Their union, once a contract of alliances, had forged into partnership. She, the advocate steering social tides. He, the steward balancing steel with soul. Yet nostalgia tinged the warmth, shadows of prices paid, flickering like old gas lamps. Victor Thorne had faded into exile, his Pittsburgh holdings crumbling under lawsuits that stripped his ill-gotten gains. Whispers said he'd died broke 5 years back, alone in a boarding house, his silver tongue silenced by regret, no family to mourn, no legacy but ruin. Nathan Hawthorne thrived, captaining the integrated fleet that linked Harrington rails to Hawthorne seas, his wife and 2 sons, a sturdy crew at his side. But Clara Belmont paid dearly. Her barbs at the opera had isolated her, invitations drying up until she wed a minor clerk in desperation, her sharp wit dulled by obscurity. Even Mrs. Astor, in her waning years, had confided once at a salon, "You taught us resilience, Elizabeth. My own battles feel smaller now." As evening fell, the family strolled the garden William had expanded, a haven of roses and herb beds tended by former rail widows, their chatter a symphony of second chances. Elizabeth linked arms with him, the gold band from that post-victory night glinting beside her wedding ring. "Do you remember the storm at Delmonico's?" she murmured, head on his shoulder. "The locket, your confession by the fire. It feels like yesterday." He squeezed her hand, eyes distant yet present. "Every day. We lost much, illusions of invincibility, but gained this." Elias raced ahead, Eliza trailing with a lantern, their laughter echoing the hope that had pulled them through. The Gilded Age's frenzy had mellowed into progress's steady hum. Women's voices rising in guilds Elizabeth championed, workers' rights etched into William's contracts. No accusations shadowed them, no cells or trials, just the quiet triumph of hearts reclaimed. In the gloaming, as stars pricked the sky, William drew her close again. "No one kisses like you, Elizabeth. Never will." Their lips met. Soft and sure, the children's voices fading into a nostalgic hush. The horizon stretched wide, schools thriving, fleets sailing true, a family unbreakable. Time had tested their love, and it endured, a legacy brighter than any fortune. As the stars wheeled above the Harrington garden that fateful spring evening in 1897, Elizabeth and William stood entwined, their children's laughter a gentle echo fading into the twilight. The Gilded Age, with its glittering facades and hidden thorns, had forged them not through isolation, but through the unyielding strength of rediscovered love. What began as a magnate's restless search for fleeting pleasures outside the hearth had unveiled a profound truth. No embrace from the world's sirens could rival the quiet fire of a partner's true kiss, one born of shared trials and triumphs. Their story whispers timeless lessons amid the clatter of progress. That duty alone builds empires of stone, but trust and vulnerability carve paths to enduring joy. In the face of intrigue and societal tempests, resilience blooms when hearts align, turning rival shadows into stepping stones for legacy. Elizabeth's journey from shadowed wife to beacon of advocacy reminds us that silence in the face of injustice only tightens the chains. Speaking truth, even in whispered salons or grand foyers, reshapes worlds. William's evolution from solitary conqueror to compassionate steward teaches that true power lies not in hoarding fortunes, but in lifting others, rail workers, shipping families, the overlooked souls fueling the era's engine. Together, they prove love withstands time's erosion when nurtured by equality, not possession. Their kisses, once dimmed by neglect, reignited to light a family, a school, a future where compassion outshines gold. And Thorne's downfall? A stark warning. Greed's web ensnares the weaver first. unraveling empires built on deceit. In this tale of rails and seas intertwined, we see the human cost of unchecked ambition, lives upended, legacies lost, yet also the redemptive spark of unity. If William and Elizabeth could mend a fractured bond amid scandal's storm, so too can we reclaim what matters in our own hurried days. What moved you most in their saga? The opera's dramatic unveiling, the storm-bound confessions at Delmonico's, or the quiet renewal 10 years on? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear how this Gilded Age romance stirred your heart. And to show you made it to the end, write the word rails there. It's our secret signal that you're part of this storytelling family, helping spread these tales far and wide. If you crave more epic narratives of love, betrayal and triumph from history's grand stages, check out the cards for similar stories waiting just for you. Until next time, keep chasing those kisses that truly matter.